I never believed in fate until the night a dying man grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Don't let me go." The ER had its own language, monitors beeping their urgent Morse code, the pneumatic whoosh of automatic doors, the chemical smell of disinfectant trying and failing to mask the copper tang of blood. I'd learned to read it all like sheet music, every trauma a composition I knew how to conduct. 6 years of night shifts had made me fluent in chaos, comfortable in crisis. But that Tuesday in October, everything I thought I knew shattered against the reality of a man who refused to die. They wheeled him in at 2:47 a.m. I remember because I'd just checked my watch, counting down the hours until my shift ended, until I could peel off these blood-spattered scrubs and pretend for a few hours that I wasn't the kind of person who held strangers' hearts in her hands. Literally, metaphorically, both. 3 gunshot wounds. Massive internal bleeding. BP dropping so fast the monitors couldn't keep up. Dr. Reyes was shouting orders, but I'd already moved, hands finding the IV site, establishing access, my body operating on instinct while my mind went somewhere quiet and clear. The place where fear doesn't exist because there's only the next breath, the next compression, the next decision between living and dying. You will feel so many emotions in this mysterious love story I'm about to tell. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. His hand found mine as I leaned over him. His grip was impossibly strong for someone losing that much blood, fingers wrapping around my wrist like he was drowning, and I was the last solid thing in the world. His eyes opened, just for a second, dark as midnight, unfocused but somehow seeing me, and his lips moved. "Don't let me go." I should have said something professional. Something reassuring but non-committal, the way they taught us in training. Instead, I heard my own voice, raw and certain. "I won't, I promise." That promise kept me in the OR for 6 hours. Dr. Reyes tried to rotate me out. Protocol said I was past my shift, past the safe limits of functioning, but I refused. I couldn't explain it then. Still can't fully explain it now. Something in that moment of connection, his blood on my hands and his life pulsing beneath my fingertips, made leaving impossible. So I stayed. I stitched. I monitored. I willed him to keep breathing when his body wanted to surrender. When we finally closed him up, when the monitors stabilized into something resembling hope, Dr. Reyes pulled me aside. His face had that careful neutrality doctors learn when they're about to deliver news that changes everything. "Emma, you did exceptional work tonight. But that man..." He paused, weighing his words. "Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Be careful." I was too exhausted to ask what he meant. I went home, showered away the blood, and fell into bed as dawn painted my apartment walls the color of old bruises. I didn't dream. I never dream after the bad ones. The media explosion woke me 4 hours later. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from colleagues, news alerts, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen, and felt the world tilt. Dante Moretti survives assassination attempt. New York's most wanted receives emergency surgery at Metropolitan General Mafia. Boss condition unknown after shootout leaves 3 dead. The photos were grainy, taken from security footage, but I recognized him instantly. That face I'd seen vulnerable and human. Those eyes that had found mine in his darkest moment. Dante Moretti, the ghost who ran New York's underworld from the shadows, the man whose name made hardened criminals cross themselves, the king of an empire built on violence and fear. And I'd promised not to let him go. I sat on my bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and laughed. The sound came out jagged and slightly hysterical. Of all the people to save, of all the lives to fight for, I'd chosen his. Not chosen. You don't choose in the ER. You treat who needs treating. But still. My hands had held his heart. My will had kept him breathing. My promise had bound me to a man I didn't know, whose world I'd spent my entire life trying to avoid. The calls kept coming. Hospital administration wanted to debrief. The police wanted a statement. The media wanted a quote. I ignored them all. Instead, I got dressed, put my hair in the same bun I wore every shift, and went back to the hospital. Because he was still my patient, because I'd made a promise. Because some part of me, the part I didn't want to examine too closely, needed to see him alive and breathing. The ICU was under guard, actual guards, men in expensive suits with earpieces, and the kind of stillness that suggested violence held carefully in check. They watched me approach with eyes that calculated threat levels and exit strategies. I showed my badge, kept my face professionally blank, and walked past them like I had every right to be there. His room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon light. Machines breathed with him, monitored him, kept vigil over this man who'd built an empire on making people afraid. I checked his vitals out of habit, professional assessment overriding the surreal knowledge of who lay in this bed. His color was better, his breathing stronger. Against every odd, my stubborn patient was going to survive. "You have gentle hands." His voice made me jump. I turned, and those dark eyes were open, watching me with an intensity that made the air feel thin. Not the unfocused gaze of the dying, but sharp and present, and seeing too much. "You're supposed to be resting," I said, falling back on professional distance like armor. "You held my heart like you owned it." His words were rough, dragged over gravel, but precise, deliberate. "I felt your hands inside me, willing me to live. Who does that for a stranger?" "It's my job." "No." He shifted, wincing at the movement but not looking away. "Your job is to stabilize and step back. You stayed. 6 hours, they told me. You wouldn't leave." He paused, and something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. "Why?" "Because you asked me not to let go. Because in that moment, you weren't a monster or a myth. Just a man who didn't want to die alone. Because I'm a fool who makes promises I shouldn't keep." "Does it matter?" I asked instead. He studied me the way someone might study a puzzle they were determined to solve. Then he smiled, and it transformed his face into something beautiful and terrifying. "Emma Clark," he said. And hearing my name in his voice felt like a brand. Age 29, went to Columbia for nursing, works exclusively night shifts, lives alone in a walk-up in Hell's Kitchen. No family nearby, no boyfriend, no social media presence. He paused, letting me absorb the fact that he'd learned everything about me in the hours since he'd woken. "You saved my life. That creates a debt. I don't want anything from you." "I know. That's why you're dangerous." He shifted again, his hand moving across the sheets toward where mine rested on the bed rail. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt that touch like electricity. "From now on, Emma Clark, no one touches you but me." It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't a proposition. It was a declaration, absolute and uncompromising, delivered in a voice that had ordered deaths and commanded empires. I should have argued, should have called security, filed a complaint, run from this room and this man and this moment that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Instead, I stood frozen, watching my life as I'd known it crack down the middle, and somehow, impossibly, stupidly, I knew I wasn't going to run. "That's not how this works," I said, but my voice shook. "It is now." His hand closed around mine, warm and alive, the pulse in his wrist beating strong against my palm. "You chose me in that OR. Now I'm choosing you. Welcome to my world, Emma. You're going to hate it." His smile widened, sharp as a blade. "But you're going to stay." Freedom became a concept I could barely remember, like a language I'd once spoken fluently but could no longer translate. It started small, subtle. A black SUV idling outside my apartment building when I left for my shift. A man in a tailored suit who held the hospital door open with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Text messages from unknown numbers. "Mr. Moretti insists on your safety." As if safety was something he could insist upon. As if my life had become his to dictate. I tried ignoring it. I'm good at ignoring things. Learned that skill early. Perfected it through residency when attending physicians screamed and patients died and you just had to keep moving, keep functioning, keep pretending your hands weren't shaking. But Dante's surveillance wasn't something I could pretend away. It followed me like a shadow, patient and inevitable. 3 days after his declaration, I confronted the situation head-on. Called the number that kept texting me. Demanded to speak to whoever was orchestrating this invasion of my life. The voice that answered was smooth, professional, utterly unmoved by my anger. "Mr. Moretti would like to see you." "Tell Mr. Moretti I'm not interested." "It's not a request, Miss Clark. Then it's a prison. It's protection." The silence on the line was louder than any argument, because we both knew what he wasn't saying. The men who'd tried to kill Dante had seen my face, knew my name, understood exactly what I meant to him now. I'd become collateral damage waiting to happen, leverage wrapped in scrubs and stubborn independence. I went to the penthouse because refusal felt like cowardice. That's what I told myself, anyway. The truth, the part I didn't want to examine, was that some traitorous corner of my mind wanted to see him again. Wanted to understand the man who'd looked at me like I was both salvation and mystery, who'd claimed ownership over my safety with the certainty of someone who'd never been told no. The building was in Tribeca, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet that money buys. His security led me to the top floor. Of course it was the top floor. And then I was alone in an entryway that cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. The space was minimalist but warm, art on the walls that looked museum quality, floor-to-ceiling windows offering Manhattan like a kingdom to survey. Dante stood with his back to me, silhouetted against all that glass and light. He'd been released from the hospital 2 days ago, against medical advice, because men like him didn't wait for doctors to grant permission. He was dressed now, dark jeans and a black shirt, and even from behind I could see the careful way he held himself, the residual pain he was too proud to show. "You came," he said without turning around. "You didn't give me much choice." "There's always a choice, Emma. You're here because some part of you knows I'm right." He turned then, and the afternoon light carved shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles, the barely healed wounds that would scar beautifully. He moved toward me with the deliberate grace of someone relearning their body's limitations, and I fought the nurse's instinct to check his incisions, to make sure he wasn't pushing too hard too fast. "Right about what?" I asked, holding my ground even as everything in me wanted to step back, to maintain the distance he kept collapsing. "About the fact that you're in danger, that saving my life made you visible to people who use vulnerability as a weapon." He was close now, close enough that I could see the exhaustion he was hiding, the pain medication he probably wasn't taking because control mattered more than comfort. Close enough that I remembered my hands inside his chest, the intimacy of holding someone's heart, keeping it beating through sheer stubborn will. "I didn't ask for this," I said, and hated how my voice cracked. "I spent 6 years building a life where I was invisible, where I could go to work, come home, exist without anyone paying attention. You've taken that away." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite regret, but acknowledgement. He reached out slowly, giving me time to retreat, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, at odds with everything I knew about him. "The men who shot me were sending a message," he said quietly. "They failed. Now they need to send a new message, something more definitive. You stitched me back together in front of witnesses. Hospital staff talk. Security footage exists. By now, everyone in my world knows your name, your face, your schedule." His hand fell away, but the warmth of his touch lingered. "I can protect you, or I can watch them use you to hurt me. Those are the only options left." I wanted to argue, wanted to believe I could just disappear back into my small, safe life and let this dangerous man and his dangerous world move on without me. But I'd seen the news coverage, 3 people dead in the shootout, witnesses who'd given statements suddenly unavailable for comment, the way violence rippled outward from men like Dante, touching everything in its radius. "What does protection look like?" I asked, the words tasting like surrender. "Security, a driver, living arrangements that can be monitored." "You mean living here?" "I mean living somewhere I can ensure you're safe. That's not protection. That's possession." His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw past the calculated calm to something rawer underneath. Anger, maybe, or frustration that I wouldn't simply comply, simply trust his assessment of danger and my place in it. "Call it what you want," he said. "But understand this, the people who want me dead don't have your moral complexity. They won't care that you're innocent, that you were just doing your job. They'll use you, hurt you, make me watch while they destroy something He stopped, caught himself. The silence stretched between us, full of words he wasn't ready to speak. "Something you what?" I pressed. "Something I feel responsible for." His voice was carefully neutral now. Emotions locked behind the mask he wore for the world. "You saved my life. That makes you mine to protect." There it was again. That word, mine. Possessive and absolute, delivered like an immutable fact rather than a negotiation. I should have been furious, should have walked out, called a lawyer, filed a restraining order. Instead, I felt the old familiar weight settling over me, the weight of being defined by someone else's needs, someone else's vision of who I should be. I'd felt this before, years ago, in a different city with a different man. Marcus had used love as a leash, affection as control, and by the time I'd realized the difference between protection and prison, I'd already lost pieces of myself I'd never fully recovered. I'd sworn, promised myself in the apartment I'd rebuilt my life around, that I would never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. I need time, I said finally. To think, to process. Time is a luxury we don't have. Then we don't have a deal. I turned to leave, my heart hammering, waiting for him to stop me physically, to reveal the violence everyone said lived just beneath his surface. Instead, his voice followed me, quiet and resigned. Your brother. Dylan. He's at Columbia, right? Pre-med? Sophomore year? I froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, ice flooding my veins. I turned slowly, and Dante was watching me with eyes that held both apology and inevitability. Don't, I whispered. I would never hurt him, Emma. But others would, others will, if they think it'll bring me to my knees. He moved closer, and now I could see the regret clearly. The weight of power that meant hurting people even when you were trying to save them. This isn't a threat. It's a reality check. The moment you touched me in that ER, you connected yourself to my world. I can manage the consequences of that connection, or I can stand aside and let them destroy everything you love, but I can't make the choice for you. My phone buzzed in my pocket, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I pulled it out with shaking hands, already knowing what I'd find but praying I was wrong. 3 photos. Dylan leaving his dorm. Dylan at the library. Dylan at the coffee shop he went to every morning, the one I'd taken him to when I'd helped him move in last year, back when my biggest worry was whether he'd remember to eat vegetables and call Mom on Sundays. The final message was text only, from a blocked number. Tell your Mafia boyfriend that protection goes both ways. We know where the nurse keeps her heart. The phone slipped from my fingers. Dante caught it before it hit the floor, glanced at the screen, and something dark and cold settled over his features. When he looked at me again, the man who'd spoken with careful regret was gone, replaced by the predator everyone feared. Pack a bag, he said, his voice flat and dangerous. Your brother will be in a secure location within the hour. You'll stay here where I can see you, where no one can reach you without going through me first. This is insane. This is survival. He stepped closer and I saw the killer everyone warned me about, the man who'd built an empire on calculated violence. But his hands, when they framed my face, were gentle. You were chosen as a message, Emma. They're telling me that nothing I care about is safe, that they can touch anyone, anywhere, and I'm powerless to stop it. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I felt the tremor in his touch despite his controlled voice. But they're wrong. I will keep you safe, both of you, even if it means burning down everything they've built to do it. I stood there, trapped between his hands and his promises, and felt my carefully constructed independence crumble. Because he was right. Because Dylan's face on that screen had shattered every illusion of choice I'd been clinging to. Because sometimes survival means surrendering to the person who terrifies you, trusting that their darkness can hold back worse darkness waiting in the shadows. Okay, I whispered. Okay. He pulled me against him then, careful of his healing wounds, and I felt his heart beating against my cheek, the heart I'd held, the life I'd saved. Strong and steady and alive. His voice rumbled through his chest when he spoke. I won't let them hurt you. I promise. And God help me. I believed him. The city looked different at 3 a.m. from the back of Dante's armored Mercedes. Familiar streets transformed into something alien, shadows deeper, every corner hiding threat. I pressed my forehead against the bulletproof glass and wondered how many days since I'd felt safe. Dylan was relocated upstate, protected. His life uprooted because his sister had been kind to a dying man. He'd called once, confused and frightened. Emma, what did you do? What did I do? I saved a life. I thought mercy was simple. We're here, Dante said beside me. Here was the East River waterfront, warehouse district, buildings looming like broken teeth. The New York tourists never saw. Why are we here? Because you need to understand what protection costs. Inside the warehouse, under a single hanging light, 3 men sat bound to chairs, faces bruised, swollen, evidence of interrogation written on their skin. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to unsee this. "These are the men who photographed your brother," Dante said quietly. One looked up, smiled with blood-red teeth. "The little nurse. Vance sends his regards. Vance. Marcus Vance." The name dragged me back 5 years to Boston, to bruises under long sleeves, to the night I'd run with nothing but terror. I'd believed I'd escaped him. But monsters don't forget. "You know him," Dante said, reading my face. I couldn't speak. The warehouse spun, past colliding with present, 24 again, believing love was supposed to hurt, that jealousy meant passion, that control was caring. Dante's hand found mine. "Tell me, how do you describe someone systematically dismantling your sense of self?" "He hurt you," Dante finished, voice gone cold. The bound man laughed. "Vance said you'd be easy to break. Said you're used to monsters taking what they want." Dante moved with fluid violence, his fist connected with precise force. "Her name is Emma Clark. Use it." I should have been horrified. Instead, something complicated unfolded in my chest. For 5 years, no one had defended me. No one had made Marcus answer. "Dante," I said, voice steady. "Stop." He turned, monster looking through his eyes. But he stopped. "For me. These men work for Marcus?" I asked. "They work for whoever pays. Right now, that's your ex and my enemies together." Dante moved beside me. "Marcus provides information about you, your patterns, vulnerabilities, your brother. My enemies provide resources. Together, they think they can destroy us both. Marcus wasn't just a ghost. He was an active threat, weaponizing my history against my present. What happens to them?" I gestured to the bound men. "That depends on you. On me? This is your trauma they're exploiting." Dante's hand cupped my face. "I can make them disappear, or turn them over to authorities with evidence ensuring prison time. You need to decide if you can live with that." I looked at the men who'd photographed Dylan, who'd brought Marcus back. Justice versus revenge, law versus survival. "I want them alive," I said, "but I want them to testify. Against Marcus, against whoever hired them. I want the truth documented and legal." Respect shifted across Dante's expression. He nodded, gestured to his security. They moved efficiently, and the men were led away. We walked to the car in silence. Dawn painted the warehouses rust and gold. My understanding of the world fundamentally altered. "He'll come for me himself now," I said. "Marcus, he'll want to finish it personally." "I know. And you're going to let him try." Dante glanced at me, chess player thinking ahead. "I'm going to give him the opportunity, under controlled circumstances. Because you're right, he won't stop until he can touch you himself. So we let him think he can. You're using me as bait. I'm giving you the chance to face him on your terms, with power to choose how it ends." His hand found mine. "But only if you want it. Say the word, and we disappear. New identities, new city. You and Dylan, protected and hidden." I looked at our joined hands and felt the weight of choice. Run again, or stand and fight with a monster at my side. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. Once. Twice. The pattern that meant emergency. Dante's jaw tightened as he read the screen. "What is it?" He turned the phone toward me. Security footage, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. My apartment building. A figure in the lobby, face obscured but posture familiar. The way he stood, shoulders back, entitled to every space he occupied. Marcus had found where I lived, and he'd left something on my door. A single photograph, visible even in the grainy footage. Me and Dante, leaving the hospital the day after surgery. The angle suggested it was taken from across the street. Professional, patient. Written across it in red marker. I've been watching longer than he has. Dante's penthouse had a library. I stood there at 4 a.m., unable to sleep, running my fingers along leather spines, trying to pretend my hands weren't shaking from Marcus's message. I've been watching longer than he has. You're thinking too loud. I turned. Dante stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing only dark pants. chest bare except for fresh scars I'd helped create. In dim light, he looked almost vulnerable. "I can't stop wondering when it started," I said. When he found me again, Dante crossed to me, moving with careful grace. "Does it matter? I thought I was free. I thought I'd escaped and built something new. But if he's been watching," my voice cracked, "then I never escaped at all." "No." Dante's hand found my chin, tilting my face up. "You survived. You rebuilt. You became someone strong enough to save lives. That's not a cage, Emma. That's transformation. I need rules," I said suddenly. "If I'm staying here, if we're doing this, I need boundaries. Something I can control." Understanding shifted across his face. 3 rules. You don't leave without security. You don't lie to me about threats. And you don't try to handle this alone. 1 rule, I countered. You don't make me disappear. Whatever happens, I'm still Emma Clark, the woman who saves lives, not the possession of a man who takes them. Silence stretched between us, heavy with meaning. Then Dante extended his hand. "Deal." I took it. His grip was firm, but his thumb traced my wrist, finding my pulse, and the gesture undid me. Intimate without being sexual, claiming without possessing. "Why do you care?" I asked. "You could have anyone. Why fight for someone who doesn't want to be here?" "Because you saw me dying and chose to save me anyway." His hands framed my face with unexpected gentleness. "Everyone else wants something. You just wanted me to live. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I stepped closer, let my forehead rest against his bare chest, right above his heart. Felt the steady rhythm, the life I'd saved. Dante's arms came around me carefully, holding me like I was precious and breakable. We stood like that for a long time, 2 people who'd survived different violence, finding unexpected sanctuary. "Tell me about him," he said finally. "Marcus. Tell me what he did." And there, in the safety of his embrace, I told him about the first time Marcus hit me. An accident, he'd claimed. About the slow escalation. About the night he'd broken my wrist and I'd finally understood that staying meant dying. "I left with nothing," I whispered. "Changed my name slightly, moved cities, became invisible. Men like him never lose interest. They just wait." I looked at him, seeing my pain reflected in his eyes. "You know that from experience." My father, different kind of cage, same principle. He raised me to inherit his empire. By the time I was old enough to question it, I was already too deep to escape. So I stopped trying to get out and started trying to transform it from within. Is that possible? Can you really change something built on violence? I don't know. His honesty was devastating, but I'm trying. It's slow and complicated, and people like your ex make it harder. We stood there, 2 people trying to be better than their circumstances, and I felt something shift. Not love, too soon, but understanding, connection. "He'll use my past against me," I said. "Marcus will paint me as someone who invites violence. Then we document the truth first." Dante gripped my shoulders. "And when he comes, and he will, you won't face him alone." His phone lit up. Both of us tensed. When Dante checked it, his jaw went tight. He turned the screen toward me. A text from an unknown number. "Detective Sarah Chen, NYPD. We need to talk about Marcus Vance, Dante Moretti, and witness intimidation. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., precinct. Come alone, Miss Clark, or we'll assume you're complicit." Below it, crime scene photos, financial records, communications that painted Dante as my captor, me as his accomplice. "They think I'm working with you," I whispered. Dante's expression went cold. "They think that because someone wants them to." Outside, dawn was breaking over Manhattan, and somewhere in this city, Marcus was watching, waiting for us to make the exact mistake he'd spent years orchestrating. The photograph attached to the detective's message told me everything. It showed Dante's warehouse, the 3 bound men, me standing there witnessing it all. Marcus had someone inside Dante's operation, someone close enough to document everything, to turn protection into evidence of conspiracy. We weren't just fighting an abusive ex anymore. We were fighting a carefully constructed legal trap designed to destroy us both. And I was the key piece of evidence that would spring it shut. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and institutional fear. Detective Sarah Chen's office was small, cluttered with case files stacked like accusations. She watched me with eyes that had seen too much cruelty to be surprised by a nurse entangled with a crime lord. "Miss Clark, do you know why you're here?" I'd left Dante's penthouse alone despite his protests. Complying felt like the only move that wouldn't make things worse. Now I wondered if I'd made a fatal mistake. Because someone wants you to believe I'm involved in criminal activity. "Are you?" She leaned forward. "You've gone from ER nurse to Dante Moretti's companion in 2 weeks. You were present at an interrogation. You're living in his penthouse. I'm not his prisoner. I'm someone he's protecting from a man who nearly destroyed me once before." Chen pulled a file from her stack. My own face stared back, younger, more bruised. Boston General Hospital intake photos from 5 years ago. Marcus Vance, domestic violence complaint, filed then withdrawn. 3 hospital visits, each with injuries you attributed to accidents. Sound familiar? My throat tightened. Seeing it documented felt like standing naked under fluorescent lights. I left him. I disappeared. I built a new life. And now he's back. Chen closed the file. Marcus contacted this department 3 weeks ago. Claimed he'd located a missing person, you, and wanted closure. He seemed concerned, even caring. The manipulation was breathtaking. Marcus had positioned himself as the worried ex. He's not concerned. He's possessive. I believe you. I've worked enough domestic cases to recognize the pattern, but believing you and having evidence are different things. Chen pulled another file. 6 months ago, 3 women associated with Moretti's rivals disappeared. Last month, a witness scheduled to testify recanted, then vanished. And now you. Tell me, what happens to people who cross Dante Moretti? I understood suddenly what Marcus had done. He'd studied Dante's world, inserted himself into an existing investigation, making it look like I was the latest person to be absorbed, controlled, silenced. I don't know what happens to them. But I know what happens to people who cross Marcus Vance. They lose pieces of themselves. They never get back. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "There's someone I want you to meet." She led me to another room. Inside sat a woman my age. Blonde, expensive clothes, haunted eyes. "This is Jennifer Hartwell. She dated Marcus 3 years ago." Jennifer looked at me and recognition passed between us, survivors identifying each other without words. "He told me you were dead," Jennifer said softly. "That you'd committed suicide after leaving him. When Detective Chen showed me you were alive, I knew everything was a lie. Marcus had been using my disappearance as a weapon, proof that escape was impossible." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Marcus is building a case against you and Moretti." Chen's voice was hard. "He's documented every move. When he's done, either you'll be charged as Moretti's accomplice or you'll disappear. Marcus wins either way." Jennifer took my hand. "But there's a third option. We testify. Together. We document everything he did. We stop letting him rewrite history." "Those men at the warehouse interrogation?" I said. "They work for Marcus. He's allied with Dante's enemies. This isn't about domestic violence. It's about using me as a weapon." Chen's eyes sharpened. "Can you prove it?" My phone buzzed. A video file from a blocked number. Dylan, my brother, sitting in a hotel room, alive but terrified, and standing behind him, hand on his shoulder. Marcus, his voice, calm and familiar. "Emma, we need to talk. Come alone, without your monster, or Dylan learns what happens to people who help you run. You have 2 hours." The video ended. Chen was already moving, calling backup, but I barely heard her. Jennifer squeezed my hand. "Don't go alone." But I would, because Marcus understood that love was the easiest weapon. I texted Dante. "He has Dylan. Sending address. Don't come. This is what he wants. But if I don't make it out, make sure my brother does." His response, "I'm already moving. Trust me." Standing in that police station, my brother's terrified face burned into my mind. I realized I did trust him. Not because he was good or safe, but because he was the only person who'd seen the worst of me and stayed. The address arrived. Red Hook, Warehouse District. where screams wouldn't carry and bodies could disappear into the river. I had 2 hours to decide who I was: the woman who ran, the woman who complied, or the woman who finally fought back. Red Hook at twilight looked like the end of the world. I sat in Detective Chen's unmarked car, watching the address Marcus sent grow closer, trying to remember how to breathe. Chen had a tactical team staged 3 blocks away. The wire taped to my ribs felt like an accusation, proof I'd crossed into a world where trust was tactical and love was leverage. "You don't have to do this," Chen said. "We can negotiate," but properly meant hours Dylan didn't have. So I'd made my choice. Walk into Marcus's trap, trust that Dante was moving pieces I couldn't see, and hope I was finally strong enough to be more than a victim. The warehouse door was unlocked. Inside, the space was cavernous and cold, and there in the center, Dylan, sitting in a chair, hands zip-tied, face bruised but alive, Emma. Marcus's voice came from the shadows. "You look good. I was worried those years running had damaged you." He stepped into light, and time collapsed. 5 years disappeared. Let him go. This is between us. But Dylan has everything to do with it. Marcus circled closer. "He's the leverage I needed to remind you. You don't get to leave me, Emma. I left because you hurt me. I loved you." His voice rose. "I gave you everything, and you repaid me by running like a coward." This was the Marcus I remembered, who rewrote reality, turned his violence into my failure. "You broke my wrist," I said clearly. "You isolated me from friends. You controlled my money and told me it was love. That's not devotion. That's ownership. And now you've found a new owner, Dante Moretti, trading one monster for another. Dante's not dangerous, not a killer." Marcus laughed. "At least I never pretended to be anything but devoted to you. Where is he?" Marcus moved toward Dylan, pulling a gun, pressing it to my brother's temple. "Call him. Tell him to show himself, or I demonstrate what happens to people who help you run." Every second stretched, every choice narrowed to impossible options. I stepped forward, put myself between the gun and my brother. "You want to hurt someone? Hurt me. That's what this has always been about. So here I am, Marcus. No defenses, no monster protecting me." His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist, the same one he'd broken years ago, pulling me close. The gun stayed on Dylan, but his attention was entirely on me. "You think you're brave now?" he whispered. "You think Moretti taught you strength? But deep down, you miss being owned." His words were designed to shatter me. Instead, I felt fury rise. Pure, clarifying rage. "You're wrong," I said, voice certain. "I don't miss being owned. I don't miss you." And the only thing Dante taught me was that protection doesn't require possession. Poetic. Did your monster write those lines? No. Dante's voice came from above, from catwalks I hadn't checked. She found those words herself. The gun swung toward Dante. Marcus's control fractured, and in that moment of distraction, I drove my elbow into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping, and the gun clattered across concrete. Dante was already descending, reaching Marcus before he could recover. What happened next was brutality tempered by precision. Within seconds, Marcus was on his knees, Dante's hand fisted in his collar. "Emma, get your brother. Get out." "No, I'm staying." Dante's eyes met mine. An understanding passed between us. He nodded. "You wanted to talk," Dante said to Marcus. "So let's talk. About the women you terrorized. About the detective you bribed. About every lie you've told to justify your addiction to control. You can't prove any of that. I don't need to. Emma's wire recorded everything. Detective Chen has testimony. And when she executes her search warrant tomorrow, she's going to find 5 years of surveillance footage, everything you used to stalk Emma and every other woman who made the mistake of loving you." The warehouse door burst open. Chen and her team flooded in, armed with warrants and evidence and the full weight of law enforcement finally catching up. I moved to Dylan, cutting his zip ties. My brother collapsed against me, shaking. "It's done," I whispered. "It's finally done." Watching Marcus led away in handcuffs, I felt something shift. Not closure. That was a myth. But completion. The end of running. Later, Dante drove us back to Manhattan. Dylan asleep in the back seat. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You saved yourself." I just provided logistics. You believed me. You let me be dangerous. His hand found mine in the darkness. You were always dangerous, Emma Clark. You just needed to remember it. The aftermath of Marcus's arrest should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the second half was still coming. Dylan stayed at the penthouse for 3 days, sleeping 16 hours at a stretch, his body processing trauma the only way it knew how. I sat with him those first nights, watching him sleep the way I had when he was 7 and I was 12, already learning that protecting the people you loved meant staying vigilant even when they couldn't. He'd wake sometimes, disoriented and frightened, and I'd remind him where he was, that he was safe, that Marcus would never touch either of us again. But on the 4th morning, Dylan looked at me across the breakfast table with eyes that had aged years in a single week and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Who are you now, Emma?" I set down my coffee, buying time I didn't have. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you saved a mafia boss's life. You're living in his penthouse. You walked into a warehouse to face your abusive ex with a wire and no backup." He gestured around at the luxury surrounding us, at the evidence of Dante's world we were immersed in. The sister I knew was cautious, safe. You worked night shifts and avoided complications and never talked about Boston. This person, he shook his head. I don't know who this person is. The words landed like an indictment because they were true. I'd spent 5 years constructing a version of Emma Clark who was invisible, uncomplicated, separate from anything that might draw attention or require explanation. And in 2 weeks, that careful construction had been dismantled, revealing someone underneath I wasn't sure I recognized either. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm figuring it out." "Are you safe here? With him?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't, because safe had so many definitions now, none of them straightforward. Was I physically safe with Dante? Yes. Emotionally safe? Increasingly? Legally safe? That remained unclear. Safe from becoming someone I didn't want to be? That was the question keeping me awake at night. "I think so," I said finally. "But I understand if you need distance from this. From me and whatever my life is becoming." Dylan was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the analytical mind that would make him a good doctor someday. "You're different with him, not smaller, the way you were with Marcus. Bigger. Like you take up more space when he's around instead of less." I felt something catch in my throat because my little brother had identified what I'd been trying to articulate to myself. Dante's presence didn't diminish me. It amplified, made me braver, sharper, more willing to take risks I'd spent years avoiding. "Does that scare you?" I asked. "Honestly? Yeah. But not because I think he's hurting you. Because I think you're choosing this, whatever this is. And that means I can't protect you from it." We sat in the weight of that truth until Dante appeared in the doorway, dressed for business in a dark suit that made him look every inch the crime lord he was trying to transcend. His eyes found mine first, checking in, assessing, that constant vigilance I'd learned was his love language, then shifted to Dylan. "Your security detail is ready whenever you want to return to campus," Dante said to my brother. "Full coverage, rotating shifts, completely invisible unless you need them. For how long?" "As long as necessary, until we're certain Marcus's associates have no interest in pursuing his vendetta." Dylan nodded, then stood. "Can I talk to you? Alone?" I started to protest, but Dante's slight headshake stopped me. Of course. They disappeared into Dante's office, and I was left alone with my coffee and spiraling thoughts. What was Dylan saying? Was he demanding I leave? Insisting I choose between my brother and this complicated man who'd become essential to my survival? Was he threatening to cut contact if I stayed in this world of violence and moral compromise? 20 minutes later, they emerged. Dylan came to me first, pulling me into a hug that felt like goodbye and promise simultaneously. "I love you," he said against my hair. "Even when I don't understand your choices, even when you scare me, you're still my sister." "What did you say to him?" "That if he hurts you, crime lord or not, I'll find a way to make him regret it." Dylan pulled back, managing a small smile. He seemed impressed by the threat. After Dylan left, driven by a security team that would blend into campus life while keeping him protected, I found Dante in his office, staring out at the city with the expression he wore when calculating moves I couldn't see. "What did he really say to you?" Dante turned, and I saw something unexpected in his face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He asked me what my intentions were, like we were in a period drama and he was your father requesting an honorable courtship. Despite everything, I laughed. And what did you tell him? The truth. That I don't know what we're building here, but I know I want to keep building it. That you're not a possession or a responsibility, but a choice I make every day. That I'll protect him because he matters to you, and everything that matters to you matters to me. The words hung in the air between us, more declaration than explanation. We'd been circling this for 2 weeks. The question of what existed between protection and possession, between gratitude and something deeper, between two people who'd found each other in crisis and didn't know how to exist outside it. I need to leave, I said suddenly. Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. Where? I don't know yet. But I need to make a choice that isn't about Marcus or safety or crisis. I need to decide who Emma Clark is when she's not running from one man or being protected by another. You're leaving me. It wasn't a question. And the flatness in his voice made my chest ache. But I forced myself to hold his gaze, to speak the truth even when it hurt. I'm leaving this situation. This penthouse where everything reminds me that I'm here because of trauma and danger, not because I chose it freely. I need space to figure out if what I feel for you is real or just gratitude mixed with adrenaline and Stockholm Syndrome. And if I said no, if I reminded you that threats still exist, that Marcus's arrest doesn't eliminate everyone who wants to use you against me, then you'd be proving you're exactly what everyone warned me about. A man who uses protection as control, who can't tell the difference between keeping someone safe and keeping them captive. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. We stood on opposite sides of his office, and I saw us clearly for the first time. Two people bound by circumstances neither had chosen, trying to decide if what held us together was strong enough to survive without external pressure. "Where will you go?" he asked finally. "My apartment first. Then maybe away for a while. I have vacation time saved up. Maybe I'll visit Dylan after he's settled back in. Maybe I'll go somewhere I've never been and remember what it feels like to make decisions based on what I want, instead of what I'm afraid of. And us." The question was vulnerable in a way Dante rarely allowed himself to be. I crossed the office, stood close enough to see the uncertainty in his dark eyes, and took his hand. If what we have is real, it'll survive me leaving. If it's not, then we both deserve to know that before we build something on a foundation of trauma and proximity, I could stop you, pull the protection card, insist it's not safe. You could, but you won't. Because you're not Marcus, and you know the difference between love and ownership. His hand came up, cupped my face with that devastating gentleness that always undid me. How long? A month, maybe 2. Long enough to remember who I am outside of crisis mode. And if you decide you don't want this, don't want me, then I'll tell you. Honestly, and you'll let me go. He pulled me against him then, and I felt his heart beating against my cheek. That same heart I'd held in my hands, that rhythm I'd willed to keep going when his body wanted to surrender. We stood like that for a long time, two people acknowledging that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back, create space, choose each other freely instead of desperately. "One condition," Dante said finally, "you keep the security detail. Invisible, non-intrusive, but present. Because Marcus being in custody doesn't mean his world stopped existing. It was reasonable, protective without being controlling. The kind of compromise that suggested growth, evolution, the possibility of building something healthy from broken pieces." "Okay," I agreed. I packed that afternoon, not the frantic packing of running away, but the deliberate packing of moving forward. My apartment would need cleaning, restocking, the resurrection of a life I'd abandoned 2 weeks ago. And then I'd figure out what came next. Dante didn't watch me pack. Didn't hover or question or make it harder than it already was. But when I was ready to leave, he was waiting by the elevator with something in his hand. "For emergencies," he said, handing me a phone. Untraceable, encrypted, with one number programmed. Mine. "If you need me, for anything, you call." I took the phone, understanding the symbolism. He was giving me freedom, but offering connection. Letting me go, but staying reachable. The kind of gift that suggested he understood what I needed, even when it cost him. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, turned to face him. We looked at each other across the threshold. Two people who'd saved each other in different ways, now trusting that what they'd built could survive distance and time and the terrifying work of healing independently. "Emma," he said as the doors started closing, "for what it's worth, you were never a possession. You were always a revelation." The doors closed before I could respond, and I was alone with my reflection and my choices and the future unfurling like an unmapped country. 3 days later, I was in my apartment, relearning the rhythms of ordinary life, when my phone buzzed. Not the emergency phone Dante had given me, but my regular one. A text from a blocked number. "Marcus made bail. Technicality with the warrant. He's out." Below it, a photo timestamp from 1 hour ago. Marcus outside my apartment building, looking up at my window with that familiar smile that promised everything and delivered only pain. And suddenly, leaving hadn't been far enough, safety hadn't been certain enough, and the choice I'd made to heal independently was colliding with the reality that some threats don't respect boundaries or distance, or the brave decisions of women trying to rebuild their lives. I stared at the photo, feeling my carefully constructed independence crack, and reached for the phone Dante had given me. Before I could dial, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole with my heart in my throat, already knowing what I'd see but praying I was wrong. Marcus stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a man paying a friendly visit instead of a predator who'd made bail on a technicality and come straight to my door. The emergency phone burned in my hand. One call, and Dante would come. One word, and I'd be rescued, protected, removed from this moment back into the safety of his world. It would be easy. It would be smart. It would also prove that I'd learned nothing. I set the phone down carefully on the console table, took a breath that felt like swallowing glass, and opened the door with the chain still engaged. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "There's a restraining order. You being here violates it." "Temporary order," Marcus corrected, his smile the one I remembered from better days, before I'd learned what lived beneath it. "And I'm not here to threaten you, Emma. I'm here to apologize." The word landed wrong, discordant. In 5 years of relationship and 5 years of recovery, Marcus had never apologized. Not sincerely. He'd said, "I'm sorry," the way people said hello, a social nicety that meant nothing, changed nothing. "I don't want your apology." "I know, but I need to give it anyway." He gestured to the hallway behind him, empty and innocuous. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes to say what I should have said years ago, and then I'll leave. You'll never see me again. It was a trap. Obviously, transparently a trap, but something in his posture, a slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before, a tiredness around his eyes, made me hesitate. And in that hesitation, I made a choice that was either brave or stupid or some combination of both. I closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. But I didn't invite him in. Instead, I stepped into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind me, keeping us in public space where neighbors might hear, where security cameras watched, where Marcus couldn't rewrite the narrative without witnesses. 5 minutes, I said, and I'm timing it. He nodded, seemed to gather himself. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual smoothness, none of the practiced charm I'd fallen for once upon a time. "I spent 3 days in jail," he began. "First time I've ever been arrested. First time I've had to sit in a cell and think about the choices that led me there." He met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not quite remorse, but awareness, recognition of consequence. "I blamed you for everything, Emma. For leaving, for running, for making me look like a monster. But sitting in that cell, watching men who'd actually destroyed lives, I realized something." He paused. I waited, not helping him, not making this easier. "I realized I am a monster, just a more sophisticated one. I used love as a weapon. I turned care into control. And I convinced myself it was devotion when really, it was just fear that if you ever saw who I really was, you'd leave. So I made sure you couldn't. The admission should have felt vindicating. Instead, it felt hollow. Because apologies, even genuine ones, didn't erase broken bones or stolen years or the slow dismantling of self that abuse accomplished with terrifying efficiency. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it. Because Jennifer Hartwell deserved to hear it, and the woman before her, and the one before that. Because I spent 3 days understanding that the pattern I kept blaming on you, on women who couldn't handle my intensity, was actually me repeating the same violence over and over, expecting different results. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the angle. Marcus didn't do vulnerability. He performed it sometimes, used fake remorse to regain control. But this felt different. Raw. Like watching someone realize in real time that they'd wasted years building a version of themselves that only knew how to destroy. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Forgiveness? Absolution?" "Nothing." He shook his head. "I know I don't get those. I just wanted you to know that what happened, what I did, wasn't your fault. You didn't invite it. You didn't deserve it. And leaving wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing you could have done." The words hit somewhere tender, somewhere I'd protected for years. Because part of me, despite therapy and distance and building a new life, had always believed I'd failed somehow. That if I'd been different, better, stronger, Marcus wouldn't have needed to control me so completely. "I'm not asking you to drop charges," he continued. "I'm not asking you to tell the police this was a misunderstanding. I did what they're accusing me of. I stalked you. I threatened your brother. I tried to use your past as a weapon. And I'm going to plead guilty to all of it. Why? Because Jennifer Hartwell is testifying, and she deserves to be believed. Because the only way to stop the pattern is to face the consequences. And because," he paused, "seemed to struggle with something. Because the man you're with now showed me something in that warehouse. He could have killed me. Should have, probably. But instead, he made sure I'd face legal consequences, that the truth would be documented. He gave you agency when I only ever took it away." I felt something twist in my chest. Because Marcus was right. Dante could have made him disappear, could have solved the problem with violence and silence. Instead, he'd chosen a path that kept me at the center of my own story, that let justice be public and legal and mine to participate in. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said quietly. Marcus nodded, started to turn away, then paused. "For what it's worth, Emma, I'm glad you survived me. I'm glad you found someone who knows the difference between protection and possession. And I hope someday you can look back on who you were when we met and recognize her as someone brave, not broken." He walked away then, down the hallway toward the elevator, leaving me standing outside my apartment with my heart racing, and my understanding of the world fundamentally shifted. Because I'd expected confrontation, violence, the Marcus I remembered. Instead, I'd gotten something more complicated. A man acknowledging his own monstrosity, taking responsibility, releasing me from the narrative where I was responsible for his choices. It didn't erase anything, didn't heal wounds or restore years, but it was something, a piece of closure I hadn't known I needed. I went back inside, locked the door, and picked up the emergency phone. Dante answered on the first ring. "Emma." His voice was tight with controlled panic. "Security flagged Marcus at your building. Are you—" "I'm fine. We talked. He's leaving." "You talked to him? Alone?" "I needed to. And Dante, he's pleading guilty. To everything. Silence on the other end." Then, do you believe him? Did I? That was the question. Marcus had been manipulative for so long that sincerity felt suspect. But something about his exhaustion, his lack of agenda, suggested he might be telling the truth, that 3 days in jail had cracked something open, let reality in. I think so. But it doesn't change anything. He still did what he did. I still need time to figure out who I am outside of crisis. I know. Another pause. "I miss you." The words, simple and honest, made my chest ache, because I missed him too. Missed his presence, his certainty, the way he made me feel simultaneously safe and dangerous. But missing someone wasn't the same as being ready, wasn't the same as knowing if what we had could survive outside the pressure cooker of trauma and adrenaline. "I miss you too, but I still need this time. I understand." His voice was rough with something that sounded like resignation and respect mixed together. "Call me if you need anything. Or don't call me. Whatever you need, Emma." We hung up, and I sat in my apartment, the one I'd fled 2 weeks ago, the one that now felt both familiar and foreign. and tried to figure out what came next. Marcus pleading guilty meant no trial, no testimony, no prolonged legal battle. It meant closure, of a sort. Freedom to move forward without looking back. But forward to what? Back to Dante and the complicated safety of his world. Forward into something new, someone new, a life built entirely on my own terms. The choice was mine, in a way it hadn't been since that night in the ER, when I'd held a dying man's heart and promised not to let go. Days became weeks. I returned to work, picking up shifts at the hospital where it had all started. My colleagues asked careful questions. They'd seen the news, knew about Marcus's arrest, wondered about my involvement with Dante Moretti. I gave vague answers, maintained professional boundaries, and slowly remembered what it felt like to be Emma Clark, ER nurse, woman with a life that existed independent of dangerous men and dramatic circumstances. Dylan called every Sunday. He was settling back into campus life, his security details so invisible he sometimes forgot they existed. We talked about his classes, his friends, anything but the warehouse and the trauma. But sometimes, in the silences between words, I felt him checking on me, making sure I was okay, making sure I wasn't disappearing into someone else's orbit again. "Have you talked to him?" Dylan asked one evening, not needing to specify who. "A few times. Brief check-ins. Nothing significant. Do you want to? Did I?" That was the question I'd been avoiding. Because talking to Dante meant confronting what I felt, deciding if the connection we'd forged in crisis could survive in calm, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that answer. "I don't know." "Emma," Dylan said gently, "you're allowed to want something that scares you. You're allowed to choose a life that looks different than the safe, invisible one you built after Boston. You're allowed to be complicated." His words stayed with me long after we hung up, because maybe that was the real work. Not choosing between safety and danger, between Dante and independence, but learning to be someone who could hold multiple truths simultaneously. Someone who could be cautious and brave, independent and connected, healed and still healing. 6 weeks after I'd left the penthouse, I received a package. No return address, but I knew immediately who it was from. Inside was a book, the collected poems of Mary Oliver, with a single page marked. The poem was The Journey, about the moment you finally know what you have to do, and begin, though the voices around you keep shouting their bad advice. Tucked inside was a note in Dante's precise handwriting. "Thought you might need this. No pressure. No expectations. Just a reminder that whatever you decide, you're not alone in the deciding." I read the poem 3 times, crying by the end, because it captured exactly what I'd been trying to do. Save the only life I could save, my own, despite the voices that kept telling me I was selfish, stupid, naive for leaving safety, for choosing uncertainty over protection. That night, I picked up the emergency phone and called him. "Emma," he answered, and just my name and his voice undid me. "I want to see you. Not at the penthouse. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere we can talk about what this is without the weight of everything that brought us together." "Where?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. "The Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Saturday afternoon. Meet me by the cherry blossoms. Cherry blossom season ended in April. I know, but it's still beautiful. And I want to see you somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that has nothing to do with hospitals or warehouses or crisis. I want to see if we make sense in the daylight. In a place designed for growth." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Saturday. 2 o'clock. I'll be there." Saturday came warm and clear, the kind of late spring day that promised summer. I arrived early, found a bench near where the cherry trees stood green and full-leafed, their spectacular moment past, but their presence still graceful. I wore a sundress, yellow, bright, the color of optimism, and felt nervous in a way I hadn't since high school, since the last time I'd chosen someone without crisis as a catalyst. Dante arrived exactly on time, dressed in jeans and a simple black shirt, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. Without the suits and the penthouse and the weight of his world, he was just a man. Handsome, yes, dangerous, still, but also uncertain, hopeful, as nervous as I felt. He sat beside me on the bench, not touching, leaving space between us. "You look happy," he said finally. "I'm getting there. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not just crisis counseling. Working through Boston, through Marcus, through my patterns of believing love requires sacrifice instead of reciprocity. And what have you learned? That I have terrible taste in men. I smiled to show I was joking. Mostly, also that I'm stronger than I thought, that I don't need protection as much as I thought I did, but that accepting help isn't the same as being weak. Emma, he paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. These 6 weeks without you have been the longest of my life, not because I couldn't function without you, but because I kept wanting to share things with you. A thought, a joke, something I saw that made me think of you, and I realized that's what I want. Not possession or protection or any of the things I've built my world around. Just partnership. With you. If you'll have it. I looked at this man who'd held me through panic attacks, who'd let me leave when it would have been easier to keep me, who'd given me space to become myself, and then waited to see if that self would choose him. I want to try, I said, but with some rules, clear boundaries, no more living in your penthouse unless I'm actively in danger, no security detail shadowing me at work, no decisions made about my safety without consulting me first. I need autonomy, Dante. Even if it's messier, even if it's riskier, I need to know I'm choosing this life, not just surviving it. Deal. What else? You keep transforming your world. The legitimate businesses, the reduced violence, the evolution away from what your father built. Because I can love a man who's trying to be better, but I can't love someone who's content being a monster. I'm trying. Every day. It's slow, and it's complicated, but I'm trying. Then that's enough. I turn to face him fully. We try this, carefully, deliberately, building something real instead of something born from crisis. And if it doesn't work, if we discover we only made sense in emergency mode, then we acknowledge it and let each other go with kindness instead of destruction. He took my hand, and the touch felt like coming home and setting out on a journey simultaneously. I can live with those terms. We sat there on that bench, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and were now choosing each other in the best possible way, freely, deliberately, with full knowledge of each other's darkness and light. The garden bloomed around us, proof that beautiful things could grow from careful tending, that some seasons were meant for spectacular display, while others were meant for quiet growth. I should tell you, Dante said after a while. Marcus's plea deal went through. He's serving 18 months, with mandatory counseling and a permanent restraining order against you, Jennifer, and 2 other women who came forward. When he gets out, he'll be on probation for 3 years. Good. I felt something release in my chest. That's good. And there's something else. He seemed hesitant. I've been meeting with the district attorney, offering to provide information about corruption in my organization, ways to clean things up legally instead of just internally. It means I might face charges, might do time myself, but it also means I'm serious about transformation. The admission should have scared me. Instead, it made me respect him more, because real change meant accepting consequences, meant facing what you'd done instead of running from it. Then I'll be here when you get back, if it comes to that. I'll wait. His hand tightened on mine. I don't want you to wait for me, Emma. I want you to live, to build your life, pursue your dreams, become whoever you're meant to become. And if, when the dust settles, we still want each other, then we'll have something real. That's what I'm trying to say, I explained. I'll be living. But you'll be part of that life. Because love isn't waiting in stasis. It's building a foundation strong enough to weather whatever comes. We stayed in the garden until the sun started setting, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his brother, the one he'd lost to the life he was trying to leave behind. I told him about my mother, who'd died when Dylan was young, who'd taught me that strength wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. We shared the pieces of ourselves that crisis hadn't allowed time for, and slowly, carefully, we began building something that felt less like survival and more like choice. As we walked toward the exit, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw his expression change. Not quite alarm, but calculation. What is it? One of Marcus's known associates just posted bail. He made threats against you during his interrogation, before Marcus pled guilty. Security flagged it as potential concern. The old fear tried to rise, tried to pull me back into the spiral of vigilance and terror. But I'd learned something in these 6 weeks of independence. Fear was information, not identity. It told me to be careful, not to be small. Then I'll be careful. But I won't stop living my life because dangerous people exist. I looked up at Dante, saw understanding in his eyes. That's the difference now. I'm not naive about risk. I'm just refusing to let risk define me. Then I'll respect that. But I'm also keeping the security detail invisible but active. He held up a hand before I could protest. Not because I'm controlling you, because I love you, and love means protecting what matters without suffocating it. The words, "I love you," hung in the spring air between us. He'd said them simply, without fanfare, like stating a fact rather than making a declaration. And I realized I felt the same way. Not the desperate, crisis-born attachment I'd feared, but something quieter, steadier, real. "I love you too," I said, and I'm terrified by it, but I'm choosing it anyway. We kissed there in the fading light, and it felt like beginning and continuation simultaneously. Like the end of running and the start of building. Like two people who'd survived their separate darknesses had found unexpected light in each other. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and full of potential. There would be challenges, Dante's past, my trauma, the work of building something healthy from broken pieces. But we'd face them together. Two people who'd learned that the bravest thing you could do was choose love without guarantee, trust without certainty, partnership without possession. I'd saved Dante's life in an ER at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. But in the months since, he'd helped me save my own. Not through protection or control, but through seeing me, truly seeing me, and loving what he found. The broken parts and the strong parts. The woman who'd run and the woman who'd finally stopped running. The nurse with gentle hands and the fighter who'd learned to be dangerous in her own right. That night, I went home to my apartment. Mine, not his, not ours yet, but mine. And I slept soundly, without fear, with my phone on the nightstand and the knowledge that if I needed him, Dante would come. But more importantly, with the knowledge that I didn't need saving anymore. I'd learned to save myself, and that made all the difference. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.